When I deployed overseas with the military, I left behind a modest parcel of land back home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, a future I had worked hard for. While I was serving, my neighborhood's HOA decided my land was abandoned. Without my knowledge or permission, they declared it delinquent, held a quiet sale, and transferred the deed to one of their board members for pennies. Months later, I came home to find my property gone, houses sprouting where my name should have stood on the county records. My outrage was matched only by my determination. I gathered my deployment orders, proof of ownership, and military protections under the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act, the SCRA. With the backing of the Judge Advocate General's office, my case became more than just a property dispute, it became a federal violation. What the HOA didn't anticipate was that the land they casually flipped was technically under the protection of the U.S. military. The courts didn't just reverse the sale, they authorized military enforcement to secure my property. The subdivision residents woke up one morning to government trucks and uniformed personnel repossessing their streets. In the end, I regained my land, and the HOA was dissolved under heavy fines and lawsuits. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. And it sent a message: you don't trample on the rights of those who serve, not while they're away protecting yours.
When a homeowner chooses to live in a neighborhood governed by a homeowners association, HOA, there is an expectation of fairness, accountability, and respect for property rights. At its core, an HOA is designed to maintain common spaces, uphold community standards, and ensure that the collective property values remain stable. Yet, too often, these organizations gain reputations for abusing their authority or overstepping their intended boundaries. My own experience is a stark illustration of how an HOA's actions can cross from simple oversight into a violation of fundamental rights. While I was deployed overseas serving my country, the HOA in my community decided that my land was vacant and abandoned. Without so much as a phone call, a letter, or any attempt to confirm my status, they initiated a sale process that transferred ownership of my land to one of their own members. This was not just a bureaucratic mistake. It was a direct assault on the principles of trust and property rights that homeowners should be able to rely on. The violation here is twofold. First, in the assumption that an absence meant abandonment, and second, in the manipulation of the HOA's legal authority to profit from someone else's property. An HOA holds limited but significant powers, such as levying fines or collecting dues. These powers exist so the community can function effectively. However, the line between managing property and seizing it is a bright one, and it was deliberately crossed. HOAs are not government agencies, yet they often act with quasi-governmental authority, making rules, enforcing them, and sometimes using liens or foreclosures as tools of control. When these powers are abused, the homeowner's voice is silenced, and justice becomes distant. What makes this even more concerning is that homeowners deployed in military service are particularly vulnerable. Unlike someone who lives at home year-round and can contest fines or show up at meetings, a service member may be stationed halfway around the world, unable to check mail regularly, attend hearings, or respond to sudden legal maneuvers. In my case, the HOA knew I was serving. They had records of my address and background. Yet they still chose to categorize my land as abandoned when in fact it was anything but. This disregard demonstrates not only negligence, but also exploitation. The association leveraged my inability to defend myself locally as an opportunity to enrich one of their own members, betraying the very trust a community should uphold. Such an act does not simply strip a homeowner of land. It undermines the concept of property ownership itself. In American law, the right to own and retain property is foundational. It is one of the cornerstones of individual freedom and personal investment in the future. When an HOA unilaterally decides to sell property that does not belong to it, it sends a chilling message. Ownership is conditional, and your rights can be erased by those with administrative power. For service members, the insult cuts deeper. We commit ourselves to defend freedoms and rights, often at personal risk, only to come home and find those very rights ignored by the people meant to uphold them. This experience should serve as a cautionary tale not only for military families, but also for civilians who live under HOAs. It reveals how easily authority can be abused when transparency and accountability are missing. A board of neighbors is still made up of people with biases, ambitions, and sometimes personal agendas. If safeguards are not in place, the temptation to exploit power for personal gain can outweigh the duty to serve the community fairly. Education about property rights, vigilance in monitoring HOA practices, and awareness of legal protections are essential tools every homeowner should possess. Trust in a governing body is not enough. There must also be active oversight to ensure that trust is not misplaced. In the end, the violation of my rights while I was deployed was not simply a matter of paperwork or procedure. It was a human decision, made by individuals who chose to prioritize personal benefit over ethical conduct. By selling what was not theirs to sell, they eroded the very trust that binds a community together. It is important to highlight this not just as a personal grievance, but as a broader lesson about how fragile property rights can be when authority is unchecked. My experience reflects a deeper issue, the necessity of vigilance in protecting one's rights, especially when serving away from home, and the importance of holding organizations like HOAs accountable when they misuse the trust placed in them.
The Servicemembers Civil Relief Act, often referred to as the SCRA, is one of the most vital safeguards that military personnel have while they are serving their country. It exists precisely to prevent situations where service members are unfairly penalized or stripped of rights simply because they are away fulfilling their duties. The law acknowledges the reality that those in uniform cannot always be present to defend themselves in civil matters at home. They cannot attend every hearing, respond to every piece of mail, or fight legal battles while deployed in another state or another country. The SCRA fills that gap, creating a legal shield that prevents creditors, landlords, and even homeowners associations from exploiting their absence. At its heart, the SCRA is not a special privilege, it is a recognition of sacrifice. Those who serve are asked to put their lives and time on the line for national security, which often means leaving behind families, businesses, and homes. To leave these behind without protection would mean that the very act of serving could cost a service member everything they worked for. That is why the SCRA provides protections against foreclosure, eviction, repossession, and other civil actions that could be taken while a service member is away. In the case of my land, the HOA's attempt to sell it while I was deployed fell squarely under the category of actions the SCRA was created to prevent. The educational value of understanding this law cannot be overstated, both for service members and civilians. For service members, it is critical to know that they have a legal recourse if they find themselves unfairly treated or deprived of property rights while serving. Too many men and women in uniform return home only to discover that they have lost homes, cars, or land because they did not know how to invoke their protections under the SCRA. Awareness of this law can mean the difference between returning to stability or facing financial devastation. For civilians, including landlords, lenders, and HOAs, education is equally important. Knowing the boundaries of what can and cannot be done under the SCRA prevents costly legal mistakes. Violating the law does not just result in a reversal of actions, it often leads to heavy fines, penalties, and lawsuits. The significance of the SCRA extends beyond individual cases. It reflects a broader societal promise that those who defend the nation will not be punished at home for answering the call of duty. It reinforces the principle that rights are not suspended just because someone is absent in service of the country. This should be seen as part of the moral contract between a nation and its defenders. If the military is asked to safeguard freedoms abroad, the least that can be expected is that their own freedoms and rights at home are secured in return. When an HOA or any other organization violates the protections of the SCRA, they are not simply committing a civil infraction, they are undermining this larger promise. They are disregarding the very legal foundation that exists to protect military families. In my own experience, the HOA's attempt to bypass these protections did not just result in the loss of land, it triggered federal involvement. Once the violation was established, the law provided not only for the return of my property, but also for enforcement through the military's legal system. That level of protection demonstrates the seriousness with which these rights are guarded, and it's a reminder that organizations cannot simply assume that a service member's absence is an opportunity to take advantage. From an educational standpoint, the lesson is clear. Service members must be proactive in familiarizing themselves with the SCRA, keeping records of deployment, and informing legal representatives or family members who can act on their behalf if necessary. Communities, on the other hand, must learn that the SCRA is not a minor technicality. It is a binding law backed by federal authority. Violating it can unravel entire organizations, as it did in the case of my HOA, which not only lost its credibility, but faced financial and legal collapse. Ultimately, the power of the SCRA is not just in its legal text, but in its role as a safeguard of fairness. It ensures that no matter where service members are stationed, they do not return home to find their property, rights, or financial future taken from them unjustly. The law is an extension of respect, a recognition that service comes with sacrifice, and that sacrifice must be met with protection. In the end, this is not about favoritism toward military families. It is about upholding the fundamental idea of justice, even when someone cannot be physically present to defend themselves.
Accountability is one of the most important principles in any system of governance, whether it is at the level of a national government or as small as a neighborhood homeowners association. When organizations or individuals exercise power without checks or consequences, abuse is almost inevitable. The situation with my land being sold while I was deployed highlights this principle in stark detail. The HOA believed they could act with impunity, assuming that no one would question or challenge their decision to declare my land abandoned and transfer it to one of their own members. Yet what they failed to anticipate was that their actions would not only be scrutinized, but punished under the law, demonstrating why accountability is so essential in maintaining fairness and justice. When the courts reviewed the HOA's conduct, it became clear that they had operated outside the boundaries of their authority. An HOA is designed to enforce community standards, not to confiscate and resell private property for personal benefit. By taking such an action, the board members placed themselves in direct violation of both state property laws and federal protections for service members. The consequence was not just a reversal of the sale, it was a complete dismantling of the HOA's credibility. This serves as an educational point for all community boards and organizations. Authority is not unlimited, and abusing it can destroy the very institution that wields it. Legal accountability also carries financial weight. HOAs that act improperly often find themselves facing lawsuits, fines, and damages that can bankrupt their funds and harm every member of the community they are supposed to serve. In my case, the financial consequences extended beyond the individuals who orchestrated the sale to the entire association. Residents who had nothing to do with the misconduct suddenly found themselves entangled in a legal disaster because their HOA leadership had overstepped. This demonstrates another key lesson. When leaders of an organization act without integrity, the harm rarely stays confined to them alone. It ripples outward, affecting everyone in the system. That is why transparency and oversight are critical. Homeowners must pay attention to what their boards are doing, attend meetings, and demand records when necessary, because turning a blind eye can result in collective liability. Reputational accountability is equally significant. Once news spread of how the HOA had attempted to strip a deployed service member of his land, the organization quickly became a symbol of corruption and exploitation. Trust in the HOA evaporated, and residents began questioning all of its past decisions. For many families, trust is as valuable as any financial asset, and once it is broken, it is almost impossible to rebuild. This reflects a broader truth about accountability. Consequences are not always imposed by courts or regulators. Sometimes they come in the form of public outrage, loss of legitimacy, and permanent damage to reputation. For organizations that depend on cooperation and mutual respect, this kind of accountability can be more devastating than fines. Beyond the HOA, the larger lesson lies in the principle that unchecked authority cannot be allowed to stand. Accountability ensures balance, reminding those in power that their decisions affect real lives. In the case of military families, accountability is even more crucial because these families often cannot defend themselves in real time. The consequences imposed on the HOA sent a clear message: predatory actions against vulnerable groups, especially those protected by federal law, will not only fail, but result in harsher penalties. This discourages other organizations from attempting similar abuses, creating a deterrent effect that benefits all homeowners. From an educational standpoint, it is important for homeowners to understand both their rights and the mechanisms available to enforce accountability. State laws often provide avenues for challenging HOA decisions, and federal laws like the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act offer additional protection for specific groups. Beyond legal tools, community members themselves serve as a check on HOA boards by participating actively, voting in elections, and demanding records when necessary, because turning a blind eye can result in collective liability. The consequences faced by the HOA in my case were a reminder that no organization, no matter how local or seemingly small, is above the law. By misusing their authority, they not only lost control of the property they had tried to seize, but also triggered their own downfall as an institution. This outcome was not about revenge. It was about restoring balance and fairness where it had been violated. Accountability ensured that the HOA paid the price for its misconduct, and it reinforced the broader principle that abuse of power always comes with repercussions. For service members, civilians, and communities alike, this stands as a clear lesson. Justice may take time, but when authority is abused, consequences are inevitable.
Justice is not always about punishment. It is about restoration, balance, and ensuring that what is right is upheld even when circumstances make it difficult. In the case of my land being sold while I was deployed, the journey was not just about reclaiming property. It was about standing up for principles that matter to every homeowner and every service member. The resilience required to fight against an HOA, with its layers of bureaucracy and its local influence, mirrors the resilience needed in military service itself. Both demand persistence, patience, and a belief that the outcome is worth the struggle. What emerged from this battle was not simply a personal victory, but a broader lesson about justice, resilience, and the importance of defending rights at home just as fiercely as we defend them abroad. One of the first educational takeaways from this experience is that justice often requires proactive effort. Many people, when faced with unjust treatment, feel powerless to fight back, especially against organizations that appear to have legal authority. But resilience comes from recognizing that laws exist to protect individuals, and persistence ensures that those laws are applied. In my case, the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act was already in place, but it required determination to bring it forward, to document my deployment orders, and to involve the right legal offices. This demonstrates a critical lesson. Rights are only as strong as our willingness to assert them. Justice does not arrive passively. It must be pursued actively, often in the face of intimidation or resistance. Resilience also means understanding that the path to justice is rarely quick or smooth. My case involved hearings, legal filings, and the mobilization of federal resources. There were moments when the HOA tried to delay, deflect, or justify its actions. Without resilience, it would have been easy to give up or settle for less than what was rightfully mine. For homeowners facing similar challenges, the lesson is clear. Setbacks are part of the process, but persistence transforms setbacks into stepping stones toward a fair resolution.
This is particularly true for military families who may already feel stretched thin balancing deployments, relocations, and the challenges of reintegration. Resilience is not just about enduring hardship, it is about converting hardship into strength and using it to fuel the pursuit of justice. Justice, however, extends beyond the individual. The outcome of my case sent ripples through the community and beyond. Other HOAs, upon learning of the consequences faced by mine, were reminded that they cannot act without accountability. Residents in other neighborhoods became more aware of their rights and more cautious about allowing their boards unchecked power. This broader impact illustrates the educational point that justice is not only about one person winning a case, it is about setting precedent, raising awareness, and protecting others from facing similar injustices. When one individual stands resiliently for what is right, the benefits often extend to many more than just that one person. Another dimension of this experience lies in the parallel between defending rights abroad and defending rights at home. Service members are trained to value freedom, justice, and protection of the vulnerable. Yet those same values must be applied domestically. Defending property rights, ensuring that laws are upheld, and demanding accountability from organizations are all part of preserving the very freedoms that military service seeks to secure. This creates a powerful continuity. The resilience shown on deployment translates into resilience in civilian life, and justice achieved in one sphere reinforces justice in the other. For communities, the lesson is equally important. Supporting service members is not only about gratitude and parades, it is about respecting their rights when they are most vulnerable. Finally, the larger lesson from this experience is that justice is not a static concept. It evolves through the actions of individuals willing to demand it, and resilience is the engine that drives those actions forward. Justice restored my property, but resilience restored my confidence in the system and reminded me that even when authority is misused, fairness can prevail. For homeowners, for service members, and for citizens in general, the message is clear. Never assume that injustice must be accepted. With persistence, knowledge of the law, and a commitment to resilience, justice can be achieved, and the lessons learned from the struggle can help strengthen communities for the future.